Dimensional analysis, or factor label, or football goals, whatever you call it, is the way that you convert from different units. Proper use of unit factors lead to proper units in your answer. The AP test will not give you full points if you're missing units, so make sure every time you write a number that you write a unit to go with it. Also make sure that when you're doing the dimensional analysis or the factor label that you are crossing or canceling out your units in your table. Alright, so use the following conversions to perform some calculations. The Kentucky Derby race is 1.25 miles. So there's my given. How long is the race in furlongs? That's the unit that I want to convert miles to. So I start with my given. Set up my conversion factor, miles on the bottom. Then I can look up here and see that 1 mile is 8 furlongs. So 1 mile is 8 furlongs. Miles cancel, telling me my answer is going to have a unit of furlongs. So 1.25 times 8 divided by 1 is 10. Now I need it to have the same number of significant figures as my given, which is 3. So I'm going to put 0.0 furlongs. You have to have a unit with all of your numbers, so don't get lazy. Your answer also always needs to have units. It's a good practice to get into of boxing or circling or underlining your final answer. When the AP reader reads our questions, he wants to know exactly what your answer is, and then he can work backwards from there to give you all of your points. Number 2, a marathon race is 26.2 miles. What is the distance of a half marathon in yards? So half marathon means I want to use half of the distance of a marathon. So that would be 13.1 miles. I want to take miles and convert it to yards. Up here in my conversion, I would have to go through furlongs to rods, then to yards. So it's going to take me 3 times to get there to the end. So 1 mile is 8 furlongs. My mile cancels out. I'm at a furlong. I keep going. 1 furlong is 40 rods. Furlongs cancel. I'm at a rod. 1 rod is 5.5 yards. Rods cancel, leaving me with yards. So when I multiply and divide, I get 2.31 sig figs here times 10 to the 4th yards. Now you could write it as 23100 yards, and it would still be the right unit. However, again, we want our AP readers to be quick with our answers, so putting this into scientific notation is a better practice, simply because they don't have to worry about thinking about those zeros, especially if the number gets even larger than this and you have several zeros. Temperature. There are 3 different temperature scales that we talk about. Celsius, which is what you measure with your thermometer in the lab. The Kelvin scale, which is actually the SI unit. It's the SI unit because it's the absolute temperature scale, which means Kelvin is the only scale that actually starts at 0. 0 is absolute, the coldest, or 0 Kelvin is the absolute lowest temperature can be. That would be negative 273 degrees Celsius, so it's incredibly cold. Fahrenheit is only used in the United States. In Chem 1, we only ask you to convert from Kelvin to Celsius, but you do need to know how to convert from Fahrenheit to Celsius. So if we take 26 degrees Celsius, how would we convert it into Kelvin and Fahrenheit? So for our Kelvin temperature, we're simply going to add 273. So we would say 273 plus 26 degrees Celsius, and that gives us 299 Kelvin. When you add and subtract, significant figures are based on decimal places, and because 26 degrees Celsius doesn't have any decimal places, then my Kelvin doesn't have any decimal places. To convert from Celsius to Fahrenheit, we would want to use the equation right here. Now this is actually solving for Celsius, so we would want to use the we'd want to solve for our TF instead. So if we did that, TF would equal our Celsius temperature times 9/5 plus 32 degrees Celsius. So we're going to say 26 degrees Celsius times 9/5 plus 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So our Celsiuses will cancel, leaving us just in Fahrenheit. And so our answer is 79 degrees. Density is the last thing that we talk about in this unit. Density is the mass of a substance per unit volume. Every substance has its own density, so it's independent of how much there is, so it's considered an intensive property. That's one of the vocab words that you need to know. Intensive is independent from the amount. Extensive means it does depend on the amount. So things like mass and volume will change if we changed how much of the substance we have. But density, because it's a ratio, is always the same. The SI unit for density is kilograms per meter cubed or kilograms per centimeter cubed for solids and liquids. Since a gas has such low density, it's typically in grams per liter. So our first problem here, our volume of our block, length times width times height. So when you multiply, you use the fewest sig figs. We have 2 sig figs, 2 sig figs, 3 sig figs. So technically our volume is 1 times 10 to the second centimeters cubed. However, when you type that into your calculator, it gives you more numbers than that. You want to hold on to that number in your calculator and use it when you go to solve for your density. So in our calculator, when we solve for density, we're going to do 615 grams, and then we're going to use the actual number for volume that we got. So your calculator would read 101.5 centimeters cubed. However, when we go to figure out the unit or the sig figs for our final answer, we have to go back and use this one. So we have 2 sig figs versus 4 sig figs. So our answer only needs 2 sig figs. So it's 6.1 grams per centimeters cubed. In our second example, we have a sample containing 33.42 grams, and it's water displacement this time. So for our volume, we'll have to say 21.6 milliliters minus 12.7 milliliters. And when you add and subtract, you want to use the fewest decimal places. So we would have 8.9 milliliters for our volume. So our mass, 33.42 grams, divided by 8.9 grams. Our mass has 4 sig figs in it, but our volume only has 2, so we would want an answer of 3.8 grams per milliliter. Whoops, that should have been milliliter. Notice that I've written units for everything. You have to have units with all numbers.